Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Deal with Vehano Joseph. This is a show dedicated to all levels of entrepreneurs looking to scale and improve their lives. So let's dive on in with our next guest. Hello, Beyond the Deal Nation, and welcome back to another episode where we explore strategies, lessons, and insights that help entrepreneurs scale their businesses, build wealth, and create long-lasting impact. Today, I'm excited to welcome Margaro, CEO of Ecoplay Structures, a company that's revolutionizing the play space industry with sustainable, eco-friendly structures that bring communities together. Mark's journey is an inspiring one. He's taken a vision for sustainability and innovation and turned it into a thriving business that not only builds up the quality of the play environments, but also emphasizes and prioritizes environmentally responsible eco structures. So without further ado, let's dive on in. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks, Vehano. Excited to be here.
Yeah, well, thank you for taking the time, and we are excited to hear your story. What's amazing is you've taken an unconventional route. You're maybe highlighting that second breath of air or fresh air or second career or whatever. Like I think that's huge. So yeah, tell us your story, man.
Second career, maybe third career, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Grew up in Columbia, South Carolina, and my dad and granddad were home building entrepreneurs. My other granddad was also an entrepreneur. He had a few different ventures ranging from the shoe business to real estate. And so I guess entrepreneurship's kind of always been in my blood, but I didn't take a direct path to get here at all. Growing up, I always had like a lot of different interests, but few passions. I liked a lot different subjects in schools, like sports, didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. And ended up going to college to get an engineering degree. That was kind of based on advice that my dad gave me. When in doubt, engineers should be able to get jobs, was basically it.
Yeah.
Engineering was never something that I was super passionate about. And I actually ended up going to law school.
Wow.
To become a patent attorney. Yeah. I liked reading and writing and was always interested in technology and thought that intersection would provide something interesting and could be a good career for me. So I did that for a few years and realized that was not really for me. I'm someone who needs to interact a lot more with people on a day-to-day basis. It kind of felt like I was doing the most risk-averse job in the world. And I'm a very risk-tolerant person. I enjoy risk. Yeah. And so I knew I needed to pivot. And by the way, nothing but great things to say about that law firm. Great people, great culture. It was just, I couldn't see myself doing that type of work for a long period of time.
Yeah, that is a very interesting path you took there. What do you think, and this for the listeners, because there may be people at college or in school right now still in that position, right? What was the catalyst that made you change from engineering to law?
The catalyst for that first change, it's a good question. Yeah, I started really getting interested in patent law during an internship where some folks in the computer science lab were trying to get something patented. I don't even remember what it was, but I kind of did some initial research on what a patent attorney did and figured, maybe that's a good path for me. I knew my path was not going to be engineering.
And I think a lot of us go through that struggle of finding yourself, right? And I don't think that ever stops. I think that's part of life. And, one thing I will say that helped me, and you just mentioned something that was really impactful, was in grade 11 in South Africa, in my high school, we had job shadowing weeks. So you would pick 3, so you'd really take the time and think about, what do I actually want to be? I think go shadow for a few days or however many days they allow you to shadow, which I thought was awesome. When you're doing those little internships or little job shadowing, it really opens your eyes to like, man, I do not want to be here, or these are not my people. Or, you always wanna see if that culture or the type of industry even fits with your personality. And I don't think people take that seriously. We end up in hundreds of thousands of dollars in student debt and in a career that you end up changing anyway. Because there's nothing wrong with, like, picking a path, but I thought it's very interesting that we don't do more of job shadowing and internships like we should.
Totally agree. And just to piggyback on something else you said, not just the job shadowing, but the amount of
Mhm.
self-reflection. I definitely did not do enough honest, deep self-reflection until I was probably in my mid 20s or late
Yeah.
20s even. And which is kind of when that second career change came from law to something else. And I didn't really know what that something else was. I thought maybe it would be entrepreneurship at some point. And I think at the time, part of me was a little bit worried about just jumping into some type of entrepreneurial venture. And so what I did was I went and got an MBA. I had never had a lot of those fundamental business school classes. So that was kind of a sort of a foundational exercise for me, and also really gave me 2 years to explore. And at the time I needed it.
And that MBA gave you that confidence to go out and seek a venture because now you've got the theory. Um, I would imagine.
Maybe a false sense of confidence. As you know, there's nothing that can truly emulate
Experience, right? Like
having your
hands-on
bottom
experience.
in the chair, as they say.
Right. Yeah, no, totally agree. I think that's makes a lot of sense because when you're running a business, it's definitely, it's not theoretical and there's nothing in a
No, it's
book that's
not.
going to help you. It's really about time in the seat, right? It's like the pilots, right? Cockpit time. Like you need that time and experience to hone in your skill and get to that level of mastery that we all strive for.
Absolutely. But I will say one thing it did help with, I think business school combined with law school is I got two different ways of thinking about risk. I think risk reward. And so from that perspective, I think the MBA really helped me determine how to evaluate risk, both from a personal perspective and from a numbers financial perspective.
Yeah, let's dive into that. What are some of the defining things that you look for, with this fresh lens that you look at companies or, business before we get into Ecoplay, because
Yeah.
I know that's your current journey, but how did this different perspectives of the different uh, degree paths open your eyes to the world of M&A actually?
Yeah. I think it was really the key thought for me, at least, is I just try to make asymmetric bets where the reward significantly outweighs the risk, or the potential or possibility of the reward outweighs the risk. And that'll, when we start talking about the acquisition, that'll come into play a lot, because that's really the sole reason why I ended up buying this company. Is I saw an asymmetric risk that I felt like I had to take.
That's awesome. I think we talk about that, and just to summarize, I think it's like looking at the risks that the business poses. Like, hey, these are the market, the economic, and the operational risk, and then this is the reward of all the things that we can improve on in the business to exponentially increase the value and the cash flow and all of that. So awesome. It's a good segue into like how the heck are you doing at Ecoplay and the story behind Ecoplay.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear that, and listeners would love to hear that. Sure.
All right. So in 2020, I was doing some consulting work for really good company. The projects were a bit hit or miss in terms of how passionate I was about them, but I love my company, love the people. I knew that it was time to start looking at other things. And I read a book called Buy Then Build by Walker Deagle. I think a lot of
Mhm.
folks who are in entrepreneurship through acquisition have read this book. And for me, that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of like, okay, it's time to take action. And so I read that book, and after that started developing a little bit of a target statement, which reflected what I was looking for in a business.
Mm.
It was
What
trying
what
to,
specifically in like the book, was some of the key eye openers for you, would you say?
Number one, that in most cases, buying a business is going to be less risky, at least for me, than starting something from scratch. I really liked the idea of having some sort of infrastructure already there, existing clients, existing employees, some existing systems and processes. I wasn't just totally inventing everything from scratch.
Yeah, yeah. That's it's so important because I've been on both sides of that. I've started, startups,
Mm-hmm.
which are brutally hard, and it's a lot of sweat equity in the beginning. And I've also acquired businesses just like you. And one of the things that becomes apparent is, I've somebody summed this up the other day. Pick the amount of manure. He used a different word.
Yeah,
you're either gonna have this level of manure, or you're gonna have that level of manure. Just get used to the fact that there's gonna be manure, so you gotta pick which manure you're okay to deal with, whether it's a public company, private company. There's just lots of things too that you're gonna have to deal with from a leadership standpoint. And it's one of the, I would say, maybe least common routes to go buy an existing business, because everyone's seeing I started up this IT thing and boom, and now it's like a 7 multiple, but there's thousands of those that didn't make it. And I think it's actually more prudent to go and find something that's already cash flowing that you can improve on and build on. And I love that strategy. Okay, so that
absolutely.
got your eyes open to looking for that, and now you've basically, well, you've defined your buy box, or what your type of company is going to, meet all
Well,
your criteria.
well, I thought I defined my buy box in terms of I was definitely geographically constrained, or I felt like I was geographically constrained. At the time, we just had our first child. My wife and I were not planning on moving outside
Right.
of the metro Atlanta area. So my search was really confined to metro Atlanta.
Mhm.
And I knew how much cash I had to put down. That sort of dictated the
Size of the business, I would imagine.
size of the business because I didn't want to raise a whole bunch of money from investors to do this. And I was really industry agnostic, with the one caveat that I didn't want manufacturing. So of course I bought
So,
a manufacturing company.
man, okay. And be the reason behind not wanting manufacturing, I'm sure restaurants too, right? That's
No
no,
restaurants. Yeah, I didn't
yeah,
want
yeah, yeah,
restaurants, or
yeah.
yeah, no
That's a
restaurants.
passion
That's a given.
business. Yeah, stay clear of restaurants. Ask me
Yeah.
now, I know. Okay, very cool. And so you ended up with manufacturing, and yeah, tell us about Ecoplay. Like, what do you guys do? How are you revolutionizing? It's an awesome company, and
Yeah.
yeah, love to hear more
So
about it.
I found this by networking with some business brokers, and this was like really the third or fourth business that I looked at. And he said, "Yeah, I've got this playground manufacturing company, yeah, that's been around for a long time, but 2020 was really rough. The owners were a bit older and looking to take some risk off the table and retire and sell the business. But honestly what attracted me to the opportunity at first was the warehouse that it came with, because the owners were selling the warehouse
Okay.
as well. And so honestly, this was sort of a real estate deal disguised as a business deal. I bought the real estate and the business. And at the time, the real estate was worth a lot more than the business was worth. The business was
Sweet.
struggling.
Yeah, yeah. So you effectively have two exits there. Let's say from a risk mitigating standpoint, you're like, okay, if the business fails, I can at least rent out the warehouse or sell the warehouse. It's got some intrinsic value to the property. And not a lot of business transactions go with real estate. Sometimes, those premises are leased, or, there's some sort of contract on it. So you're not effectively buying the real estate. So, okay, that's a good way to get that surety in the deal, and obviously makes it also. I don't know if you did SBA, but probably a
We,
really
yeah, we did.
okay. So SBA, they love some real estate attached as collateral for your business loans.
That's
Awesome.
right.
And so you're buying this, and this is 2020, so it's COVID, right? This is like,
Yeah.
yeah. So we bought two companies during COVID. did the same thing, just saw the opportunity. So you're an opportunistic buyer. You're looking at where where there's opportunity. What was the opportunity that you noticed in Ecoplay at the time?
Yeah. At the highest level was that when I bought the company, there were no dedicated salespeople and no cohesive marketing efforts. So at the very highest level, it was
So you dropped
let's
in.
let's throw some money at digital marketing. Let's hire a full-time salesperson and let's see what happens.
Wow.
Originally, I wasn't planning on being like the day-to-day general manager when I bought the company.
Okay.
We were going to leave the team in place, with some active guidance and see where it went. The first half of 2021 was rough on a lot of different businesses. The supply chain was going absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
We didn't have a whole lot of lead generation either. And that combined with, I did a very poor job as an owner of developing and then setting clear expectations with everybody here.
Right. Yeah,
Which,
it's a hard thing to do, right? Stepping into, I guess, how old was the company
uh,
before you guys were gone?
the company had been through several iterations, but folks have bought the assets of the previous companies and things like that. And so I'll just say that people have been manufacturing playground equipment, this pretty much the same formula playground equipment in this facility for about 30 years.
Wow. Okay.
More than
So
30 years, actually. Yeah. So it had been around.
yeah. So that comes with its own challenges, like, um, you know, like the imprint of the culture already that's been
Yeah.
there for 30 years. Um,
Yes.
how did you guys navigate that?
Well, we definitely did not do enough diligence into the culture that existed here, which, is just a rookie business buying mistake. And I'll also add, just if in case any of your listeners are interested in business buying, in 2020, I didn't know about a lot of the resources that are widely known today, like SMB Twitter. A lot of the, call them thought leaders in the small business world. I either didn't know about them or, they didn't exist, at least publicly, in 2020. That scene has sort of exploded in the last 4 or 5 years. And so there are a lot more resources out there now for business buyers than there were back then. So I think maybe because the price of the business was so low, we were a little bit naive with how much effort we spent on hardcore diligence.
Yeah. Yeah, I think looking back at some of my experience on acquiring companies and the in-place culture, it's very hard to gauge that like up front. So, because there's always a lot of gatekeeping from the seller side. So,
Yes.
it's very, anybody going through, it's almost like buying real estate, right? Like you can get the, rent rolls and the T12s and all of those types of things, but you don't know the tenant base. You can look at work orders, you can look at Google reviews. There's only so much you can do until you're in the seat. And then it's okay, this is what's really going on. There's the glossy package, presentation, and then there's the actual, day to day. So completely understand that. And,
Exactly.
I think, would you say going forward, if you ever had to buy another company in that space, what would you do differently from a vetting standpoint?
I would definitely want to have conversations with key employees.
That's huge.
And culture turnaround is tough. I wouldn't recommend pursuing businesses that need a huge cultural turnaround unless you're an expert in that area.
Yeah. And just to highlight to the listeners, cultural meaning like the types of you talking about like accountability or things, or how
Absolutely.
previous management used to do things and trying to turn that around, or you're talking about just unscrupulous people? Because obviously you're not buying those types of businesses, right?
No, it's really all of the above. It's how are people held accountable?
Yeah.
Is there a vision in place? How are things measured? How are things managed?
Yeah.
What are the norms? How do people interact with each other?
Right. Communication channels. Yeah. Okay.
communication channels. Yeah. I mean, I think those cultural norms also, it, it influences all of the operations of the business.
Absolutely. How would you then, because you've obviously made a huge shift there and you've put in a ton of new systems and processes. How would you, how would you describe the major things that you've changed and kind of give us an example of like what that output was?
It probably took me over a year in the business to be able to clearly define and articulate a vision for the business. And so once I was able to do that, we came together really and defined exactly who we wanted to be and what our culture is. And the way we did that was we went through as a team to define the behaviors as specifically as we could related to exactly how we wanted to act, how we wanted to treat each other, how we wanted to treat clients, how we communicate with each other. And we've got core values, but I think a lot of times core values lack teeth and lack specificity. So what we have that really influences us a whole lot more than core values are fundamental behaviors. So, for example, one specific example that we are really focused on right now is documenting everything properly. You don't have to guess what that means, right? Document everything. And we've got examples internally of what we mean by that. It's, you know, if you contrast document everything properly with integrity. I mean, integrity can mean a whole bunch of different things to a whole lot of different people, but document everything properly, that's a very specific behavior. That's critical to our operation. And so we have a whole bunch of those fundamentals that are key for our culture.
And then that drives behaviors, right? That gets you better outcomes. And so completely understood. So just to sum that up for folks that are listening here, the difference in large companies and when you have lots of communication channels and complexity, when you're trying to build a culture around visions and values, and your values are these typical 5 types of values like integrity, excellence, whatever, right? You always see them on the walls. You completely you can miss the ball completely when you're having, you just have people from different walks of life. So it's exactly what Mark was saying. Integrity to me means something different to the next person. And when you distill it down to an actual behavior, this is how we handle our customers. We respond quickly. We are fanatic about response time, where you do all these kinds of things that is clear, it's understandable, and having those defined and followed by all is kind of what Mark's talking about, how he creates
Absolutely.
a culture.
And you mentioned another one of ours, be a fanatic about response time. I'm sure that's one a lot of folks use if they've
one of ours. If you're a
looked at
service
culture
business,
wise, but the other side of that is you've got to do something with those behaviors too. You can't just preach them and have them. You've got to reward and
hire and fire by them, right?
That's right. You've got to hold people accountable to doing those. And the way we do those, we have our quarterly reviews, and these are the values these are the fundamentals that we think you're strong in. These are the ones that you need work in. And people, there's a portion of bonuses that are directly reflective of core values or core fundamentals.
So you incentivize it on a quarterly basis, and it's something that's driven in your performance reviews. That's
absolutely
amazing.
And if you think about it, a couple of these are obvious, like the one you just mentioned, be a fanatic about response time. If we're not fanatic about our response time, we're going to lose leads.
Yeah, especially in a culture where it's probably they were doing business with a lot of referral business. They're not really actively pushing to get that market share. So that's the way you get it, is being a fanatic about response time, and also not dropping the ball on your customer base, right? So keeping up to that, which leads me into my next question. We're talking about culture and company, but the thing that strikes me about your business is this sustainable and eco-friendly product. So tell us about the product and how that materially is different to other and just for listeners listening, it's playgrounds. It's these awesome. I've actually seen it in some of my local playground areas. It's like where you may have an eco play structure in your neighborhood.
You may.
Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So our core product is called Ecoplay lumber, and it's made out of post-consumer recycled HDPE, high density polyethylene plastic. And it's different from probably 99% of other playground equipment in that it's recycled plastic. It's not metal. So that's one of the core differences. If we didn't buy our stuff, it might end up in the landfill because it's all
Yeah,
post-consumer.
it's huge.
And honestly, when I was searching, sustainability wasn't necessarily something that I was looking for. And it's honestly not something that I don't think a single client of ours has made their buying decision based on.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's something that's a nice to have, and I certainly appreciate it, but it's not like
So the
our business
defining
is,
product.
yeah, it's not one of the defining characteristics of why our product is successful at all.
Wow. Really?
Yeah.
So how do you educate, I guess, decision makers about it when they're making that purchase decision? What is the I guess because there has to be some unique thing about and I guess are you trying if that's not the angle, then what is the angle?
We think our differentiator is more on customer service, honestly. We provide better customer service than our competitors do. At least we think we do. And we've had clients tell us that. We've never had a client tell us that they bought our product because it's eco-friendly.
So yeah, that just goes to show that it's not. I've also had that thing. I'm like, oh, it's gotta be recyclable and
Yeah,
sustainable and green. And end of the day, it's like, can you deliver what your product is? It is, and I think that's the most fundamental thing about anything out there.
100%. Are you providing enough value to where the client's going to pay that price, and can you do it on time or whenever the client needs it? That's the biggest thing. There are advantages about our recycled product.
Yeah,
Unlike wood, it doesn't splinter or rot.
right.
And unlike metal, it doesn't rust.
So does it
We've
have
got
a longer shelf time, lifetime expectancy, or how does that compare to the other?
yeah, it can. We've got a 50-year warranty on our Ecoplay lumber, and there are structures in the Marietta area I know of that are close to 30 years old, and structurally they look good. Some of the plastic on it has faded a little bit, but
Yeah.
structurally they're sound.
Wow, that's awesome. Built to last. Love
Built to
that.
last. Absolutely.
It's amazing.
But funny enough, that built to last value proposition
Yeah.
doesn't hit home with the majority of our clients either.
Really.
Yeah, the
What do
majority
you
of our,
think that is? What do you think that is? It's just
let's say that you're on an HOA board, or you're just a member of the HOA. How are you really going to live there for 30 or 40 years? Probably not.
okay.
Maybe.
And so is that your typical consumers like home residential communities or
A lot of
apartment?
communities,
Okay.
churches, schools, and property
Okay.
management companies.
Yeah.
Property management company, that's another good example. Property managers typically
Roger.
only stay, a couple of years
Yeah.
at whatever position they're in. So if I tell them, well, hey, over the next 50 years, my product might save you a little bit of money over the competitor
Yeah.
X's. That's not a winning. That's not persuasive. That's not, you know, that's that's not going to win them over. And honestly, when it comes to sales, we don't really try to win people over anyway. Our product is not for everyone. We try to figure out who it's for, and we don't need to persuade. We need to deliver really good customer service, and we know generally what price they should be willing to pay.
It's awesome. So that takes me to our next like little segment here. It's growth and scaling.
Mm-hmm.
What has been the most effective tactic or you know process or whatever that you've implemented that helps EcoPlay continue to grow and that's helped it scale like it has?
A couple of different things. First, maybe a year and a half or so ago, we implemented EOS. For anybody who doesn't know what that is, that's the entrepreneurial operating system. It's described in detail in a book called Traction by Gino Wickman. We don't follow it to a T. It's sort of an EOS light, but it's basically a management system to help business owners set a direction and not get overwhelmed by everything that's happening in their business. So that was one, just to get us organized and get us on a path. I think the second, from like a lead generation and a business development perspective, is active involvement in a lot of local networking groups. We've got a digital marketing presence and it does all right, but I think the physical boots on the ground methods of networking for businesses like ours are much more fruitful.
Yeah, that makes sense, because we shied away as a culture from like having real interactions with each other. Like I heard a
Yes.
stat the other day, like people don't even do phone calls anymore. People just text and whatever. And even least like getting out together and networking and face
I
to
got an
face.
interesting stat for you. I started reading a book called Contagious:
Okay.
Why Certain Ideas Spread and Others Don't. And there was a stat in there that said that only 7% of information is communicated online.
Really?
Percent of word of mouth is communicated online, like word of
Okay.
mouth.
Also, okay, yeah. So everything is, yeah. I mean, that makes complete sense, because we're always like overloaded, sensory overload with information, and
Yeah,
yeah, it's the whole trying to grab your attention type of thing that's going on in the social world. So wow, okay,
that's right. The social world is very, very, very competitive.
it's very noisy,
It's very
right?
noisy. There's no guarantee your stuff's going to get seen by the folks that you want to see it anyway. And unless you're an e-commerce brand or something, if you've got physical goods and services that you're delivering, I don't think there's a good substitute for repeatedly showing up at different local events and finding your local community.
Yeah, get out there, network. There's fantastic people in your community. Build these
Yes.
relationships. I stress this with people, with all my students and things like that. I'm like, get out and network. Find that local community. A big kind of hack, if you will, is using there's a app called Eventbrite and Meetup, and just look in your local market. Like, just search in your local zip code. There are tons of events happening, and you just haven't exposed yourself to it. So yeah, and then obviously on the business side of things is LinkedIn, and start seeing what events are being hosted. Yeah, couldn't agree with you more there, Mark. That's awesome. One of the things that you mentioned, yeah, was EOS, and building that framework around your daily operational business, and just putting that system in place. I think, what has been the most valuable lesson that you've learned as a leader, as it comes to like being purpose driven and all of that? What's some takeaway that EOS has kind of opened your eyes to?
One of the takeaways, I think, is that the mindset of staying organized and staying focused on certain goals and objectives is contagious. Once I put it in place, the team picked up on it quickly. When you have a small team, there's 10 people total, including me. No one here had ever heard of EOS or had ever done anything like EOS. There was nothing like that ever here. Systems and processes were either outdated or immature. But when this got put in place, people picked it up and ran with it.
Yeah.
It's helped me develop. It's helped
Okay.
outside of just, leadership development.
Yeah, that's awesome. So to sum up that, it's putting a framework in place and getting everybody aligned, so we're all rowing in the same direction, I think is what
Yes.
Gino Wickham says, is getting everybody to be focused on the same goal. That's amazing. And it's so important, because if any of you have ever run a business, it's like there's so many moving parts, and being able to have a framework, and a defined process. Let me add another piece. I have this one mentor of mine. He has, once you define those roles and responsibilities, you have an oak, and that's one ass to kiss. That's kind of what EOS does. It puts that framework around that process, and who's the leader, who's in charge, and who's responsible for that metric. Because then you don't have ambiguity. and any vagueness of responsibilities. Everybody knows, okay,
Yeah,
this is what I need to show up. So very cool.
yeah, it's so true. And before EOS, as a new business owner, I didn't always do the best job of being clear, of really being crystal clear with my expectations. And so I think EOS forces you to search for the soul of the business, if you will,
Yeah.
and figure it out and be clear.
And that's, yeah, you're the leader, you're leading. So you've got to be clear on where you're leading your team to. So I love that. Guys, get traction,
Yes.
read EOS if you have a business, if you're building a business, if you're in a position and you can build your own business, some of these principles are golden.
And it doesn't have to be EOS either, just some sort of framework to help you get clarity, because it's not easy. And when you're developing a vision and you're developing all of these metrics that you need to track and figuring out if you've got the right people in the right seats and figuring out if your roles and responsibilities are clear and they're the right ones and all of that stuff that every business owner should be doing, it definitely can feel like you're not making a whole bunch of progress as you're working on this, as you're trying to define it, because there's no clear output at the time that impacts the financial statements, I guess.
yeah. Yeah. And your people are so important too. I mean, your people are everything, right? In your
Yes.
business, right? So
Yes.
if they're all rowing in different directions, or they have their perceived way of doing things that isn't in alignment with what the goal is and the vision of the company, then that's a problem that needs to be addressed. And, that's one thing I struggle with as a business owner, in the past is just having those tough conversations, and sometimes you avoid it, and to your detriment, right? Like, if you're trying to just keep the status quo, and sometimes you need to shake it up and get clear, and set those boundaries, right? And keep moving towards your goal. So I love that EOS is something that can help you put that framework in place to help to get everyone that rowing in that right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't seem like doing a great job at holding people accountable is something that comes naturally to most people, but I do think it's a skill that can be learned, and I think it's a skill that you can grow with the help of something like an EOS.
Yeah, yeah, agree. It's crucial.
Yes.
Um, all right. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs that are looking to, build a business or buy a business? What are some of the key things that you think you would, if you had to start over today? Actually, better question. If you had to start over today, what would you do differently? In terms of being an entrepreneur.
I think one is be careful who you take advice from, including me. What works for me may not work for you.
Interesting.
Yeah. I know people who've tried EOS and hated it.
Right. Yeah.
I think that my naivete at first ended up being a hugely positive attribute, because knowing what I know now and the businesses that I look to invest in now, Ecoplay at the time did not have many of those characteristics.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of growth. I completely understand that. One of our first deals, as we were building our real estate portfolio, I had a partner in another state, well, not another city in the same state, but I was 4 or 5 hours away. So I relied on kind of like, our boots on the ground. But, once I actually went out there and saw it for the first time, I was like, yikes. I would not buy this again, but it did really well. There was a lot of, I mean, the numbers matched the business plan, and we could execute on a proven value add strategy. So definitely, I understand the naivety aspect, and sometimes it's just you just got to back yourself and go for it, right? Like that's
100%. And I think that imposter syndrome affects a
every
lot more people than you probably think. Having consulted at multi-billion-dollar businesses all the way down to owning my small business now, imposter syndrome exists everywhere. And the truth of the matter is that a lot of people feel like they don't know what they're doing at any given moment. I feel that way a lot. Like a lot of these initiatives that we're pursuing are things I've never done before, but you figure it out.
Yeah. And you've got a framework to work from. So it's not from scratch. Everything you do, you have experiences that you're
Hmm.
applying. And sometimes if you don't know, then it's time to get a mentor or group or some sort of and a mentor. Sometimes people forget that you can get a mentor in a book, right? Like
Yes,
someone else's story, read someone else's that interests you. Like I highly recommend that because you learn some of their lessons. And then, next step to that is go out and see the people that are doing the things that you want to do and be live at the level that they're living at. And, take them out for coffee, take them out for lunch and pick their brain, and see if there's any way you can add value to them. So, yeah, very cool.
absolutely. And one more piece of advice I'll give, if you've already made the decision that you want to be an entrepreneur, whether it's via real estate or you want to buy a business or you want to start a business, don't get stuck in analysis paralysis.
Yeah. Yep. And
Have a bias
analysis
for action.
and analysis paralysis is kind of going back to your imposter syndrome thing. It's you start to look at the numbers and the financials and the business plans, and you're like, well, what if this and what if that? And
Hmm.
I had a lecturer back in university. The subject was auditing, but he always had this
Fascinating
analogy of like,
subject.
yeah, we'll put you to sleep. You want something, put you to sleep. There you go. And so but he always had these things for our long form questions. He said, these are 2 or 3 or 4 pages of questions that you need to answer on a exam or test. And he's like, how do you eat an elephant? And it's like piece by piece. If you break a big process up into little steps and just work through it
Hmm.
piece by piece, you'll get to the end or you'll get to the result. So don't forget that. And yeah, Mark, this was awesome, and I think it's definitely some jam-packed information for folks out there aspiring to get into their own business. What's next for Ecoplay? What's anything exciting on the horizon? What are you guys doing? Um, you know, as this play, and kids love these things, and I'm sure there's so many just opportunity out there as this the country grows. But what's next for you guys?
Yeah, well, I think we're also lucky enough to be in a metro area that is growing like crazy in the middle of the region of the country that's growing like crazy. So there's no substitute for that. I don't think we'd be having the same amount of success if we were located in Fargo, North Dakota. Not to pick on Fargo, I'm sure it's a lovely place, but
Yeah.
next is one is to keep doing what we're doing, and we're also adding some products and services this year that we've never really formalized. I don't want to speak on that just yet because we're
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
in the middle of figuring out how to roll those out, but should be some additional revenue streams, and we'll see how it works.
Exciting. Exciting. Well, Mark, thank you for sharing your journey and your insights with us today. We really appreciate it, and your commitment to sustainably improving our communities was, I think it's a huge selling point, but I guess the buyers don't care. But yeah, sustainable playgrounds that will outlive, a lot of folks and also their tenures in those communities. Very, very cool. And for those that want to learn more about Eco Play, Mark, what's the best place for them to contact you? How can they reach you, learn more about your business?
I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn,
Okay. And your website for Eco Play?
www.ecoplaystructures.com.
Here we go. So, guys, go out there, follow him on LinkedIn, follow the company, reach out if there's anything you want to learn more from us. And as always, remember, success isn't just about the deals you make, but it's about the impact you create beyond the deal. Until next time, have a great day.
Thanks, Fiona.